Hello, everyone, and welcome back. And welcome back to Managing Midlife Mood and Metabolism. And Dr. Laurell and myself are going to be speaking today about a question that came in, or something, a topic that someone wanted us to talk about, and it's self-care and the practices of how we do self-care with depression. And that was one of my interests always about mental health and what's happening in the mind. And this is a very exciting topic. So, hello, Laurel. How are you today?
Good, yes. And like everyone else, I can get overwhelmed by life and I have to do those self-care things also.
Well, I made a list, and we'll talk about them if we can, and then maybe you can chime in on some other ideas. And one of the things, let's first talk about what is depression. And I want to be simple about it, but if we think about it, whenever our energy is really high, that's one way energy goes, or energy can be dipped really low. So I was thinking, depression is really a problem of an overstimulation. We get so overstimulated, you can't stay up overstimulated all the time. And what happens? We drop down. The simplest way to think about that is a sugar high, or I'm going to use some things that aren't as good for us, or people that abuse drugs, you get high, but then you come down. Anytime you're high on something, you have to come down because the whole idea is balance and equanimity. So if we
Mhm.
approach depression from that perspective, as we were overstimulated, how are we going to nourish and rebuild the the deficit that was really developed or that happened after being overly stimulated? And that's the way I'm approaching it today. As
Mhm.
what are those self-care practices that we can do to refill the pot that's been drained from the overstimulation? So that's the trajectory of where I'm going with this whole concept. And the first I thought about is nourishment, the word nourishment. How do we
Mhm.
nourish our whole organism with proper foods, with proper supplements, and absorption? Proper absorption, I would say, would be the first. So let's start with that. And I'd love to hear what you have to say, Laurel, on this. And then maybe I could chime in some things with it. But nourishment, I would say, is the first self-care practice.
Yeah,
Nourishment,
that
we're going to talk about nourishment with food because nourishment is the whole package in and of itself. We nourish with proper sleep. We'll talk about uh, social connections, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with the nutrition, though, and the nutrients of what would be really good, nourishing concepts for us to really look at.
yes, that's a very great question because you and I both work with a lot of patients in that perimenopausal, postmenopausal age where things have kind of accumulated over years, and including that we've just been working with these nutritional deficits for years, and it can be an individual nutrient. I've seen a few cases where B12 has changed somebody's life, but often it's deeper, about getting balanced nutrition and protein at regular intervals throughout the day. Our brain needs protein because it takes the amino acids that uh, our proteins are made from. It takes those individual amino acids to make neurotransmitters. And so if we're making sure that we're getting a high quality protein source at even intervals throughout the day, then we're giving our brain the building blocks it needs.
Well, thanks for that. I look at it whenever I've written books or done courses or anything, I look at nutrition from the perspective of three pillars: the time you eat, the quality of food that you eat, and the quantity of food. All of those will come into the nourishing factor. So based on what you said, we're talking about the quality of foods with proteins, correct proteins. Doesn't have to be meat if we have vegetarians, not a problem at all. It's just that we need to have balance, and that's the key. I like timing. I always like to say timing first because we nourish ourselves. The most important part of the day to nourish yourself is between 10 and 2. because that's when your digestive fire is the hottest. Your enzymes, your whole system, your metabolic engine is up and running at its fullest. So that's when I always tell people, have your main meal midday, and it'll keep you burning throughout the day. Burning meaning your furnaces will be burning. You won't have that same slump. What I'm finding people are doing now is, and it can lead to depression, they don't eat, and then they'll eat everything at night. And people do that, but over the long period of time, I'm not quite sure that's really going to be the best for the optimal metabolic engine to happen and to keep
Mhm.
you afloat and not get into that place of depression. And we're using depression here as, I like to call it, depression fatigue. We're fatigued, we're let down, we're fatigued, we're not having that exuberance for life. So between the nutrients that we speak about, the protein, carbohydrates, fats, all in balance, plus, as you mentioned, B12, I like to tell people to take a whole spectrum of B vitamins because they're so important for other
Yes.
things like methylation, et cetera. And those are the important points when we talk about, you have to have a nourishing diet, whatever that is. If you can't work with it yourself, which I love people to work with it themselves, find someone who's a healthcare practitioner who specializes in that with real quality of knowing what to help you do with your lifestyle. Let's move on to, I think, one of the second big pillar I found for moving through self-care practices for depression is movement. As hard as it can be, get yourself moving, get yourself
Mhm.
a brisk walk, yoga, and dance. We were just talking about it. I'd love to hear what you have to say about dance. Just getting the body moving, lifting up the spirits for
Mhm.
that feeling. What do you think?
Yes.
What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
A lot of people are getting to the point where they feel stuck in some ways,
Right.
I mean, life's hard. There's challenges, and sometimes, those are challenges we can't move or alter at that moment. But when we're moving, and a lot of women really respond to dance, or even if it's, some type of Zumba, or, something that gets them moving in that way, it helps with that stuck feeling on this psychological level. So it's one of the things that I love to do, along with singing, and just things that brighten my day, open me up to uh, feel more of that vitality, that spark that we can sometimes lose.
Well, speaking about singing, I always knew when you could pick up my guitar or whatever and just sing, letting out, like you said, being stuck, letting out the expression. So we have art, music, uh, dance, all of those things. And we can even do it together. Sing your favorite
Mhm.
song and dance around the room. I know I've
Mhm.
done that in the past, and I have friends who have told me they've done that or go to a professional class. So yeah, I think that movement is the key for moving out of that stuck. I'm
Mhm.
calling it depression, but that's that state of feeling there's no movement at all.
Right. Yes. And then another layer that we could add to that movement is if we can find times to move or exercise out in nature, because then we're
For sure.
getting sunlight for our vitamin D, and we're getting contact with nature, which is one of those other things that, especially for many women like me, that's where we really feel revitalized, is when we're in nature, even if it's just
Oh,
a
sure.
hike
Sure.
once a week, or, something along those lines.
Oh, nature's wonderful. Well, we don't have sunshine here yet. We've been in a, I don't know where the sun's hiding behind the clouds, but I just love to be out myself. I like to start the day that way, actually. Another one I came up with an idea, well, there's two more I was going to talk about is one is sleep. I find that, I mean, we talk about the system of the brain cleansing itself, even the flushing of
Mhm.
toxins that may cause us to, when we're in that state of a depression state or a state of feeling stuck. So we really need to have proper rest and proper sleep. And I know there are many things we've talked about it with magnesium to aid us
Mhm.
in our rest at night, but sleep is very, very important. I know that I have a routine for sleep that I use, and I've given it to clients. I'll say what I do, and maybe you have something, but I always say rinse your feet with warm water or take a shower right before
Mhm.
bed. I say rinse the feet because it seems to be much easier. Get off of these social devices, these Bluetooth devices, the internet. Get off a few hours before bed, rest, have a cup of warm tea. I like to use chamomile. You can take some supplements based on what your constitution is, but really prepare yourself for the rest so that you can rest and recover because there's a
Mhm.
lot of regeneration that takes place in the brain at night with proper rest.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think you've really hit on it. And what what might even be as important as all those individual tips is remembering to give yourself that self-care time. Like
Sure.
I
Yeah.
see so many women who are caretakers of others, and they've been doing that for so long, and they're getting burned out, and they are to the point where they're really needing that sleep, but maybe they're having trouble even setting themselves a bedtime and going to sleep at a reasonable time because they're not setting aside some time for themselves for that self-care, even if it's a 15 minutes before bed for a routine like you're describing to get better sleep. I see so many women who are just needing to carve out a little space for themselves for rest and rejuvenation.
I like to call it inner self-care when I teach the relaxation and meditation systematic practices because I started doing it, monthly, not monthly, bi-monthly, because people are asking me not to talk about it, but actually give guided practices that helps them rest. Because I think there's a real problem, which will bring me into the next point of social connection. We really need human to human contract or contact or human to four-legged if you don't have people around, pets, that we could have that that real connection of life, a life force that you
Mhm.
do not get from a device. The device is something that's actually hijacking the mind and it's causing more depression and despair. I've tested it on myself. You
Mhm.
see everyone on these devices with remember, selfies are lonelies. I remember a comedian said that. We're seeing smiling, look, we're all having fun. If you're really having fun and having the best of time, you're not taking selfies because you're so engaged in the moment of having fun with your children, with your friends, and where you are. And it's real important to pay attention. And now more than ever, we really need to pay attention to acknowledging human beings as well as our four-legged beings, as well as everything from the plant kingdom to the animal kingdom to the mineral kingdom, all of nature. Nature needs to be
Mhm.
connected. We need our connection. And without that connection, we're feeling it. We're all feeling gloom and doom. And I say all, I mean, there's very few people out there that are actually exuberant. And if they are, it's because they're getting distracted with something else because we have to there's a reality of the collective consciousness right now with what's happening. We're all in this together. No one's an individual. We think we are. That's where depression comes from. That individualistic thinking that uh, it's about me. I've fallen into the trap and I have to continually be aware. And that's what we always say, be consciously aware of this. And then you can start lifting yourself with the proper nourishing
Mhm.
techniques.
Yes, you're so right. There's so much more depth to the experience when we get to interact with someone in person. And but even if we can't do that, even uh, picking up our phone and actually making a call. If you find yourself drawn to your device, maybe say, okay, but let's look through my contact list. Who can I reach out to? Because there's other people that need that too. So you're doing them a favor to reach out in that way.
It's really about reaching out. So what we covered today is the self-care practices we have to look at, and it's a very big topic. And maybe we'll, if our audience is interested and has specific questions, we'll dive more deeply into nourishment with the gut and with other things like that. So we talked about the nourishment, we talked about movement and exercise, we talked about sleep, and we talked about social connection, connectivity with others. And I think that that would tie up our episode. And if you do have questions or comments, that's what we're feeding off of, these dialogues that we're having. We would be delighted to hear from you. And always remember, you have the power to transform yourself. It's all within yourself, actually. So until next time, take care and remember that power of transformation lies within you.